Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to make pulled pork on homemade pretzel rolls with home fries, a mini slaw to top on our pulled pork sandwiches, and a pasta salad. And then we're going to prep our sourdough for tomorrow night. So let's start by getting our noodles in our water boiling. And this is going to be for our pasta salad. So we're going to use about a half a bag. There we go. And then I'm going to give them a quick stir. There. Just so they don't stick to the bottom of the pot. And now let's start on our home fries. So I'm going to be using some russet potatoes, and we are going to be cutting them into kind of like a French fry shape. So I'm just going to cut them. You don't want to make them super thick because you kind of want them to cook up and crisp up nicely in the oven. There we go. So I'm just kind of cutting them about that thick, and then we'll cut them all in half, and then we'll make little slices. So they're kind of like a home fry or a little bit smaller than a potato wedge. And the trick is you want to try to get them all to be as close in size as possible so that they cook up at the same time. There we go. And you're going to want to use a russet potato on these because like Yukon Gold potatoes, those are just not great for French fries. This one has like a little bruise in the middle. You never know until you cut your potato open what it looks like on the inside. There we go. Make some slices down. Perfect. And my kids are not a huge skin thing, so we're going to leave off some of the skins. And then we're going to do the same with this guy here. Just going to got my first one, and now I'm going to just make my slices down. There we go. And we'll just slice through. And you're essentially just making these little perfect little kind of French fries nuggets. These are like my kids' favorite home fries that I make. And they give my pasta a little stir. And then we're going to turn it down just a smidge so it doesn't boil over. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to toss these with some oil, flour, Lowry seasoned salt, and some black pepper just to kind of get you that kind of steak fry taste to it. And you want to coat them well with the oil so that all the nice flavors stick onto it. And it also helps prevent the potatoes from like drying out and getting like crunchy versus like a nice tender with a crispy outside. Okay. And we've got one more potato after this. I always like to cut off like one side right here, and then I can put it flat down. And that way I have a nice stable edge to cut it on so your potato doesn't slip and slide. It's always about what you can do to make it easier and safer. Get all of these. Just make sure I separate them all. Perfect. And just a few more slices and the potato prep is done. Okay, so we've got our big bowl of potatoes here. So now we are going to drizzle. This is a pretty good size. These are big potatoes. So we're going to drizzle about 1/4 cup of olive oil on here, which I'm just going to be using up the last of these 2 bottles. I find I always have like little bottles that have just a smidge left in them. And then I've got a smidge left in this one. There we go. And now I've got 2 bottles less in my cabinets. And then we're going to use some Lowry's seasoned salt. It's like almost like a celery salt with paprika, onion, garlic. It's just an overall delicious spice. Very savory one. And you're going to give a nice coating. And then we're going to use some black pepper. About 1/2 teaspoon. You're going to want about 1.5 teaspoons of Lowry salt with 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. And then we're going to take a nice big scoop, like a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of flour. We're not completely breading the potatoes, but you want a good amount. So I'm going to say like a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half. And then we're going to toss these with our hands until they're all coated with this nice kind of seasoned mixture. And this gives you, the flour and the seasonings gives you kind of that like steak fry taste to them. We're just going to coat them all up. There we go. You want to make sure they get all of that delicious flavor on them. Perfect. And then I do have my oven preheated to 450 degrees. Let me grab my first of my oven trays. And we're going to spread these out. We're going to wait a second before we pop them in because I want to get our pretzels kind of working before we pop them in. And now what we're going to do is you want to just spread them out and make sure none of them are like on top of each other because you want each one to crisp up on its own. And so I'm using, this is a pretty big sheet pan. It's actually like a sheet and a half, but it fits the whole width of the oven. And I will say they are great because you can get a lot more on it. And I think this one, it's like I got it at Target. It's, I think, part of their threshold. So it's not even like a super bougie pan. Okay, we've got all of our kind of potatoes spread out. So I'm just going to set them over here. And we'll pop those in the oven in just a minute, but I'm going to give my hands a good wash. There we go. And then we're going to turn on our water over here for our pretzels to start boiling. It'll probably help if I put the right burner on. And then earlier I made my pretzel dough and I have it proofing in the oven. And this is just super simple. It's a tablespoon of yeast, 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, 4 cups of all-purpose flour, 1.5 cups of water, and a fourth of a cup of butter, melted butter. So we're going to take this out and we're going to make our rolls. There we go. And so this is the same dough that I use for my homemade pretzels. So we're just, instead of rolling them out into a pretzel shape, we are going to roll them into kind of a nice little bun for our pulled pork. So I'm going to line my baking sheet here with some parchment paper. And then I'm going to use my pastry cutter. And we're going to just divide this because we're going to make 8 buns here. So we're going to just try to get as even as possible. And there we go. Perfect. Maybe that one's a little big. And then I'm just going to kind of try to tuck these around into a nice little ball, pinching in and then kind of flattening them out so that they're not super domey. Perfect. So we've got one done. And again, I'm pinching. I'm trying to keep one side nice and taut. I think that guy's going to be my big hulky one. And stretch it in out. And this dough is a really soft, like pliable dough. And it's got a nice sponge. I did have it proofing in the oven at 95 degrees for about an hour. So it's doubled in size, which is what you want. And then what you're going to do is, once our water comes to a boil, we're going to put some baking soda in it. And then we just boil these for, about 20 to 30 seconds on each side. And then we'll bake them at 450 for about 8 to 10 minutes. Give it a nice spread out. And again, we're just going to shape it here. And then kind of, you see how it looks ugly on the bottom? We're just going to pinch all of that together. And then you're going to flatten it out because you just want a nice pretty top, because when they cook up, they're going to puff up, and then you can cut them right through the middle. Now, true pretzels are cooked in lye, which gives it that kind of dark brown, crunchy outer crust. I don't really like to work with lye so much, so I use baking soda, which gives you a nice kind of chewy crust from when you boil it, and it gives it a kind of, we'll do an egg wash on it, but they're more like the American, like Annie Ann's pretzels, the nice soft ones you can get at the mall. Here we go. And make our little, pinch it here, little pockets. And I will say this dough, or these are just like so soft and absolutely delicious. Let me give this a quick stir. This is our noodles for our pasta salad cooking up. We're going to cook them until al dente, and then we're going to run cold water over them so that they don't keep on cooking, because we want them to cool them off fast for our pasta salad. We're going to do fresh mozzarella, tomatoes, basil, spinach in it. Be delicious. Kind of goes nice with the pulled pork. And my pulled pork, I had it finished cooking in my Instapot over here. And I just used a butt roast, a pork butt roast, and I cooked it in with some liquid smoke, bay leaves, pepper, garlic, salt, a little Worcestershire, so that it has like this great flavor overall. And then we'll add some barbecue sauce. But the liquid smokes gives you that kind of that mock, barbecue pit feel to it, for something that you can do pretty quickly any time of the year in your Instapot. Okay. Here we go. Perfect. Okay. I'm going to bring these over here. I'm going to add my baking soda to the water here. It's almost to a boil. We want it to come to a complete boil. We're going to add a good amount of baking soda to the water, about, I want to say, 1/4 of a cup to 1/3 of a cup. This is going to give you that nice kind of crust on the outside of your pretzel. So we're going to let that heat up, and I'm going to get my slotted spoon out, because we're going to be dipping our rolls into the boiling water with the slotted spoon. But while those until that's getting to a boil, let's start prepping our bread, our sourdough bread. And actually, I might, let's see, time-wise, maybe in just a second, let's put our potatoes in actually before I do that, so that they can cook up. So here are the potatoes, our home fries. I'm going to pop these in the oven, and I'm going to start them on the top rack. And then when we put our pretzels in, I will move them down. And this is at 450. That way they cook up high, they get the high heat, but then once we put them underneath the pretzel, they'll still continue to cook, but you don't have to worry about them like burning or crisping up too much. Okay, so let's start our sourdough breads for tomorrow. We're going to do a basic loaf, and then we're going to do a Chipotle Mexican cheese loaf. So during our lunchtime stream, I fed my starter so it will be nice and bubbly. It had already like overflowed earlier, so I had to switch out my cheesecloth, but we've got a nice bubbly active starter. And then got warm water and then unbleached bread flour. So we're going to start by putting 100 grams of our active starter into each bowl. And so you want to make sure you've fed your starter anywhere between 4 to 8 hours beforehand. So, and we want 100 grams. I find using the scale is the best way for your bread to turn out accurate every time. We'll do 100 grams in here. There we go. Almost. Okay. And then we are going to add 375 grams of warm water to each one as well, which is about like 1.5 cups. And you want to use warm water because it helps hydrate the flour faster and it allows it to just mix in a little bit better. Perfect. And now we need 375 in here as well. There we go. Okay. Perfect. So we've got our water in our bowls. And then I'm just going to take my dough whisk and we're going to essentially dilute our starter until it is completely mixed. This helps it incorporate into the flour better. And then we're going to add in some salt, about 2 teaspoons of salt into each one. So this is just salt, and I'm going to get an eyeball. It's 8 to 10 grams if you want to use it by a scale, but I want 2 teaspoons. So that's about perfect. And I know there's like controversy of whether you add the salt now or after your last stretch and fold. I always add it right now, and it works out perfect every single time. Okay, we're going to let those, let me give my noodles a stir here, and then I'm going to give them a good touch. They still need a little bit more. I will say ziti noodles take a lot longer to cook than most noodles. Our water is boiling here, so we'll come back to our sourdough in just a second, but we're going to do this part first. So what we do is we are going to drop each one of our pretzel rolls into the water. We can do about 2 at a, maybe 3 at a time. And we're going to let them boil for about 30 seconds on each side. Do you see how they like come to the top? So what we're going to do is after a little bit, we're going to just poke them over. That way they get equal boiling time on each side. So we just go boop. And then I always try to make sure I put the pretty side facing back up when I do it. The boiling is what's going to give you that nice chewy skin on your pretzel. Otherwise, if you just bake it up, it'll be like regular bread. Okay. And you don't boil it too long, because if you boil it too long, then you're going to have a bagel versus a pretzel. A bagel, you boil for about 2 minutes. There we go. And beautiful. So we're going to let them boil up. Again, it's about 20 to 30 seconds in our baking soda water. And that's just going to give you that nice kind of like crispy crust on our homemade pretzel rolls, which we'll be having with our pulled pork sliders. They give it the poke over. And I will say, you always got to do the poke over because the natural air in the dough makes it rise to the top. It makes it rather buoyant. So you want to do it on both sides so that you have an equal like development of the crust. There we go. Beautiful. And you can see they actually puff up a little bit when you cook them, because this is what they were before. And they get just a little bit bigger when you boil them. And then we'll brush them with an egg wash and we'll pop them in the oven for about 8 to 10 minutes. Now, if you make them into pretzels, you would roll them out and then shape them and then dip them in the water. So it's the exact same dough recipe, and they kind of cook about the same way. And they get nice and big and poofy, and they are just the most delicious. My kids absolutely love them. Okay. And slide these guys out. I'm going to turn this water off. We're going to let them sit for just a second, and then we'll do an egg wash on them. But let's finish up our bread here. Okay, so this is going to be our basic one, and we're going to add about 500 grams of flour to it. Okay, which is about 3 cups. So we've got, it's 150, 342, and 500. That's for our first one. For our second one, this is going to be our bougie spiced up one. We're going to add a couple of our spices now. So we're going to be using some chipotle chili powder. You're going to use about 1.5 teaspoons. This is going to give it a nice kind of red color to it. And then I'm using a little like chipotle chili mix. And this one, you're just going to use about 1/2 teaspoon. This one has a bit more texture to it, which will hydrate in, those seasonings will also hydrate in the flour. I'm going to give this a nice stir. There we go. And let's see. And now we're going to add again 500 grams of unbleached bread flour, which is about 3 cups. Okay. And then we're going to take our noodles off. We're going to strain them real quick. And so we want them at a perfect al dente. And so I'm going to put them through here. And then we're going to run some cold water through them because you want them to stop cooking right away. So the only way to do that is to get them cold. So you just run cold water over them, just like this, and they'll get nice and cold, and that way they'll keep them firm without getting soggy. So, perfect. Give them a good shake. And then we're just going to put them in our bowl right here. We'll just let them drain for a little bit. And that is going to keep them, once you put them in the water to cool them off, it stops their cooking process. Because if you don't do that, then they can get mushy. Okay, I'm going to use my dough whisk. And we are going to whisk up our first loaf. This is our basic loaf. This is an all over favorite. Everyone likes it. This is just like that basic sourdough loaf that you get from the store. So, and the reason we used warm water is to help it incorporate really nicely, because if it's cold water, it doesn't soak in the water just yet. The flour takes a little bit longer to rehydrate. There we go. Perfect. So, this is our dough right now. By the time we're done with our stretch and folds, it will not be nearly as sticky, but it needs time to rehydrate. Okay, before we whip this one up, let's put our pretzels in the oven, and we're gonna move our fries down. Oh, silly me, we forgot one thing. I'm always like, you gotta do your egg wash on it. If you don't do your egg wash on them, they won't have this nice pretty sheen. So I always got to set it out to remember. So we're going to use 1 egg and about 1 tablespoon of water. And you want that water in there so that the egg doesn't curdle on top of your buns or your bread. So you need about 1 tablespoon. And then we're going to mix it up. And this helps keep that egg wash thinner, because if it's too thick, it just is going to have like an egg curdle on top of your bun. And then we're just going to use a baster. And then I'm just going to kind of coat the top of this with this egg wash. And this is going to give you that nice golden shiny look to our pretzel buns. There we go. Beautiful. You want to make sure you just kind of really get a nice coating all of it. Unfortunately, you'll have about half of your egg wash left over, but there's just really no way to use any less than an egg. And beautiful. Okay, now these bad boys are ready to go into the oven. We have our oven preheated to 450 degrees. So they like to cook nice and high for about 8 to 10 minutes. Just depends on your oven. So here are our beautiful home fries. They're about halfway done cooking. So we're gonna slide them down and we're gonna put these guys right here on top. And then I'm gonna set my timer for 9 minutes. That way I can check to see if they're done. If you make them smaller, then of course they would cook up a lot faster. Okay, when I make the pretzels, I typically make about 12 in a batch, and so they're a little bit smaller, and then they take about 8 minutes. But these are a bit thicker.
Some people say they use the leftover egg and fry it up for their dogs.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure my dogs would like that. Although one of my dogs he's a food thief. He steals food from my 1 and 3-year-old, and he's gotten quite chunky. He's chunky boy, and he maybe needs a little less food. Although he sure acts like he's malnourished all the time. Okay, so here we've got our chipotle dough all mixed up. And then we're gonna add some sun-dried tomatoes and some cheese to that during our stretch and fold process towards the end. But we're gonna let it sit here and we're gonna let it hydrate. And while that is hydrating, we are going to make the rest of dinner. Okay. So here is our noodles. I'm gonna just pour out this little last bit of water that came with it. They're nice and cool now because I can touch them with what you want because nobody wants a hot pasta salad. And then what I like to do is I start by coating them with some balsamic vinaigrette. And I love this Marie's. And then there's another one that I like. It's in like a fat short jar. We're going to just do about, I want to say 2 tablespoons. We're going to give it a nice coat here, because you want them to really like soak in the flavor in the beginning. And then I always dress them with a little bit more at the very end. And then we're gonna do a little sprinkle of garlic salt. And this is just to season up the noodles because the noodles are bland, so they need something. We're gonna let them sit here while we prep the rest. Okay, those are sitting. Let's prep what's gonna go in there. We're gonna have some tomatoes. Some nice cherry tomatoes. I'll grab a couple handfuls out. I already pre-washed these. As you can tell, they're nice and wet. There. And maybe a few more. I like the more the tomato, the better. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut each one of these in half because you want it to really soak up that vinaigrette when we add it in. And when they're full, like size, they don't soak it up well. And I will say this is one of my most requested dishes when we go to like a potluck or a picnic. Everybody asks me to make this pasta salad because it's just so good. It's just a very different pasta salad. It's a very light and refreshing pasta salad versus the mayonnaise heavy ones. Here we go. And then we're going to add, after we have these, we're going to add some fresh basil, fresh spinach, some red onions, and fresh mozzarella to it. And then we'll just redress it with a little bit more vinaigrette. But it's also one that is great to like make a day ahead. And then right before you're about to serve it, you redress it with the vinaigrette because, of course, the noodles act like sponges and they suck all that in. There we go. And I will say, if your knife catches on your tomatoes when you're cutting them, that means your knife needs to be sharpened up. And a sharp knife is safer than a dull one because dull knives will slip when you're cutting, which can lead to accidents. Okay, we've got some fresh mozzarella here. We're not going to use the whole one. We're going to use half of it. Also, what is great is if you can get the mozzarella balls, like they're called pearls. Those work great as well. So I'm going to just take about half of this and we're going to kind of cube it up and we'll toss it in there. So this is already pre-sliced and I'm just going to cut it into little cubes to throw in there. There we go. So we've got our fresh mozzarella, yum, yum, yum. And we're going to use a little bit of red onion. You want to use red onion. You don't want to use yellow or white onion. You really, if you don't have the red onion, skip it. Red onion is just the right type of sweetness and onioniness. Yellow onion will just be way too strong. Same with white onions. So you've got to stick with this. You could use a shallot or you could use some green onions if you don't have, or chives. But I find red onion is where it needs to be. We're going to do a nice fine mince on it because we don't want to be, hit in the face with the onion when we eat it, but more of like a subtle undertone. There we go. We're going to put our minced onions in. And then I've got my sad little basil plant who is begging to be planted outside. But we're going to steal as many leaves as we can from this one. I have another one over in the window too that's even more pathetic. I will say, I'm thinking next week I'm going to start my garden outside. I'm going to go and get a bunch of fresh herbs, at least start my herb garden, because I think we're done with the frost. We had like another 80-degree day here in Tennessee. So I'm like, I think we're done with winter. You just never know. Sometimes in Tennessee, you have just these crazy little weird, like it's like a surprise winter that pops up and you have like a frost. Okay. So we've got just a little bit of fresh basil here. I'm going to give it a quick mince. And normally, if I had a lot more, I'm the person who is the more the better when it comes to fresh basil. So sometimes I would use even like triple this amount, but you just got to get some in there. It adds such a lovely flavor. And then we're going to put in some lettuce, some spinach, just about a handful. And I like baby spinach, but you could definitely use the full leaf. And you want to give it a quick little chop too, so you just don't have any huge leaves. Perfect. There we go. And then we're going to add this into our pasta salad. And we're going to give it a nice mix now. So I'm going to give it a little drizzle right here of the dressing. This is going to just help kind of bind some of those spinach leaves and stuff together. And then we're going to mix it up, really tossing and coating. And this is just a really fresh, happy pasta salad. It just really beats those like container ones that you can buy in the deli section. And it's really not a lot of work. Beautiful. Look at that. Just delicious. So we've got that as our side, which will pair perfectly with our pulled pork. And now we're going to just make a mini coleslaw because I love to top my my pulled pork sandwiches my pulled pork sandwiches with some coleslaw. So we just have a teeny bit of leftover cabbage. So we're just going to make a really small amount. We don't need much. Okay, so we're going to just start with about, I want to say maybe 2 tablespoons of mayo, because this is not a huge amount. And then we're going to use a little bit of sugar. Now, I know some people like a really sweet coleslaw. I'm more of a savory one. So we're going to just use about a teaspoon. There we go. Because I like a more salty coleslaw than a sweet one. And then we're going to use a splash of apple cider vinegar. Again, you could use white vinegar, but I feel like the apple cider gives it a slight sweetness to it, but it's not too bad. Or just about a teaspoon or so. But I hear our pretzel rolls, so let's go check on those. And then we can pop those out if they're ready. Oh, beautiful. They've got this nice golden rich color, which is gorgeous. Look at those beautiful rolls. Our potatoes still need a few minutes, but these are just gorgeous. So this is our using my homemade pretzel recipe. And let me go, I got it beeping over here real quick. But this is our homemade pretzel roll. And instead of rolling it out into pretzels, I shaped them into nice little circles, flat domes. And then we boiled them and then we covered them with egg wash to get this just beautiful, luscious top. And then to get the true pretzel roll feeling, you want to take room temperature butter. I got some right over here, a little bit. You don't need much. And we're just going to rub it over the top of each one. And then we're going to sprinkle some pretzel salt on it, which is very different than regular salt. So I will say, don't really use regular salt. You need pretzel salt for it because it's kind of been salt that has been rehydrated and then dehydrated. So it's more flaky with a lot less salt. So I'm going to sprinkle it right here. And this is going to be our just delicious pretzel rolls. They're just gorgeous. Beautiful. And again, you want pretzel salt, not regular salt. Okay, well, we are almost done with dinner here, so let's finish everything up. We're going to mix our sugar, apple cider vinegar, and mayo together. And this is just going to be in the base. And now we've got our cabbage right here. And this is just a slight green cabbage. We're going to slice it really thin. And again, this is not to have coleslaw on the side. This is more to top on top of our pulled pork slider because I really love that dichotomy between the kind of the coleslaw, nice, bright, kind of sour tanginess. And then you have our kind of our sweet, savory barbecue sauce. There we go. Make sure I don't have any of those stumps in there. So this is really like, think of it like a relish versus a true like coleslaw on the side. Perfect. And then I have a carrot. This is more for a pop of color, but we're just going to do a couple grates of a carrot in here. There we go. You don't need too much, just enough to give you that little pretty orange pop in there. And now we're going to toss this all in that mayo mix that we have. Beautiful. And we just want to make sure it gets completely coated. And again, that was mayo, sugar, and apple cider vinegar. And that's going to make a beautiful, like tart, tangy coleslaw that we can top our sliders with. Perfect. So that is ready. Let's clear this area up and let's get our pulled pork out so that we can mix it with some barbecue sauce. Okay. So I cooked this on the high pressure setter, and this was like a pork roast, a butt roast that we cooked on high. We had pepper, Worcestershire sauce, liquid smoke, garlic salt in here. And now I'm just going to pull this meat out and we're going to shred it and add a little bit of barbecue sauce to it. Let me get a nice dish for it. So let's see how it's just falling apart. That is what you want. I like to cut my roast up into good sized chunks. That way it gets nice and tender. Beautiful. And then we had bay leaves. I put about 5 bay leaves in here because you really want that in your nice like flavor. And I did some onion powder as well. Okay. And we're just gonna see how it's just falling apart just perfectly. This is what you want. Excellent. Nope. Little bay leaf here. Okay. Before we dress it with some barbecue sauce, we're going to go grab our fries out of the oven. And then we will assemble and we will have dinner just about ready. Nice and steamy. Okay, turning them off. These are our beautiful crispy French fries, and I'm going to use my spatula in just a second. You're going to see the bottom layer is going to have this just wonderful crispy crunchiness on them. Here we go. So what I like to do as soon as I take them out of the oven so that they stay. So what I like to do as soon as I take them out of the oven so that they stay. You've got this beautiful crunch on that side. And we're going to just stick them all in a pile. This prevents them from getting dry. So I always mound them right up into a pile together because it keeps their natural moisture together. Beautiful. And this is why, like, you could put parchment paper down, but I find it's better to cook it on the tray. And this is a bumpy tray because it gives you that crunchy, crispy edge on them, which is what you want. Beautiful. Okay, we are ready to assemble our dinner. Let me take this out of the way, and I'm going to grab a plate and a little bread knife. Okay. Now use your favorite barbecue sauce. I love the Sweet Baby Ray's hickory brown sugar. I like the sweetness. I am not a spicy or tangy barbecue sauce. I like the sweet barbecue sauce. So here is our beautiful pretzel roll. It is soft and tender, and we're going to cut it all the way through here. If I had my bread knife, that would be better, but we're just going to use a serrated knife. It's hot. There we go. You can see just how soft and tender it is in there. And then we're going to put our pulled pork, a nice pile of it on here. And then what I like to do is then I'm going to give it a nice drizzle of barbecue sauce. So we got to drizzle the barbecue sauce. And then we're going to put a nice kind of heap of our coleslaw on the top. This is going to give you that kind of tangy flavor. And then the mayo is going to be nice and creamy and beautiful. So we have this on, and now we need a good serving of our home fries. And last but not least, we do our last dressing over our pasta salad because you always want to dress it right before you serve it so it's nice and delicious. And put a nice happy scoop of it on, and this is our dinner tonight. We have our delicious home fries with our pasta salad with fresh tomatoes, basil, mozzarella, and spinach. Then we made our homemade pretzel rolls where we put our pulled pork and some barbecue sauce and homemade coleslaw for just a great, nice dinner that kind of reminds you of summer. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day to try to show you what we're cooking and just, show you what we're feeding our family here. Well, don't forget to like and subscribe. And again, thanks for joining us.